The sky above the ranch was a wide, empty canvas painted in faded gold and ash blue, the kind of sky that promised nothing and remembered everything. Dust rose in slow, lazy spirals as the wind moved across the dry earth, brushing the brittle fence posts and rattling the doors of forgotten sheds. Amid it all stood Emmett Granger, tall, silent, and unmoved. His hands, gnarled like twisted bark, gripped the porch rail as he scanned the pasture with eyes that no longer expected to see much. He didn't talk much anymore. Not to the neighbors, not to the birds, not even to the wind, though it had been his companion for decades. But every morning at dawn, he came out here with his coffee, black and bitter, and watched the land like a man waiting for something that would never return. The pig was back again. Same spot, same patch of dry, stubborn earth, just behind the old horse barn. Its pale pink body was smeared with mud, snout pressed deep into the dirt as it dug with frantic determination. Emmett narrowed his eyes. That pig had been at it for a week now, same time, same hole, like it was trying to unearth the past. He stepped off the porch and walked slowly toward it. His boots crunched the gravel, a sound that used to be drowned in hoofbeats. Now it echoed like loneliness. The pig didn't stop digging, even when he approached. It was a strange animal, rescued months ago from a flooded farm downstate. Emmett hadn't wanted it, didn't want any more mouths to feed. But Lena had insisted. "You keep talking like this place is hollow," she'd said that day, shoving the cage into his arms. "Maybe this pig can fill something." Now he crouched beside it, grunting as his knees protested. "Tater," he muttered, "you're gonna dig all the way to China. You keep at this." The pig snorted and kept going, kicking up clumps of dry soil. Emmett stared at the ground, then at the old barn looming behind them. It leaned a little more each year, its wood gray and splintered, its stalls long empty. Once it had been the heart of the ranch, filled with horses, filled with life. Now it was just bones. And in its shadow, a pig kept digging at a grave no one had named. He stood, dusted his hands on his jeans, and turned to leave. That's when he heard footsteps behind him. Morning, Emmett. He didn't have to look to know it was Lena. 17, sharp-tongued, too curious for her own good. She wore the same ragged hoodie and jeans every time she visited, always with a pencil stuck behind one ear. "Mornin'," he said without turning. She came up beside him and watched the pig. "He's at it again, huh? Every damn morning. Maybe he smells something. Maybe he's just dumb." Lena smiled. "Maybe. But pigs are smart, you know. Smarter than dogs, even." Emmett grunted, unconvinced. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that doesn't push you away, but draws you into something shared. Lena looked toward the barn. "You ever think of fixing it up?" "No. Why not?" He said nothing. "I read somewhere," she continued, "that horses don't forget. They remember the people who loved them, the ones who hurt them, too. Maybe that barn remembers things, too." Emmett's jaw tightened. "You read too much." "Maybe," she said, not offended. "But sometimes when people won't talk, you gotta learn how to read other things." That hit something. Emmett turned and walked back toward the house without another word. Lena stayed behind with the pig, crouching beside it, patting its back as it snorted and dug. Inside the house, Emmett leaned against the kitchen sink, watching them from the window. The girl and the pig. It would have made a strange painting, but something about it settled in his chest like a pebble in still water. He moved to the hallway, past the old photos that lined the wall, faded images of rodeos, a younger man atop a proud Mustang, a boy with wild curls holding out a blue ribbon, both of them grinning like fools. Emmett didn't look at them anymore. But today he paused. The last photo in the row was cracked down the center. In it, the boy stood beside a tall gray horse, hand resting on its neck like they shared one heartbeat. The horse's name was Dust Devil. The boy was Jonah. Emmett touched the frame, just for a second before moving on. He ended up in the barn by sunset, pulled there by something he didn't quite understand. The pig was gone now, sleeping under the porch like it had done something right. Inside the barn, the air was thick with old hay and older memories. Sunlight filtered through the cracks, striping the floor like prison bars. He ran his hand over the stall door, once polished smooth by years of use. It groaned under his touch. Then he saw it, the patch of dirt behind the barn, disturbed and uneven. Emmett stepped outside and walked to it. The pig had gone deeper than he thought, and something was there, half buried. He knelt. His fingers brushed against cool metal. A horseshoe. Rusty. Bent on one side. Worn in a way that whispered of long rides and harder land. Emmett's breath caught. He looked up at the barn, then at the field beyond it. And for the first time in years, he didn't just see emptiness. He saw a beginning. And the pig. It snorted in its sleep, as if it knew. The horseshoe felt heavier than it should have. Emmett turned it over in his calloused hands, tracing the worn curve, the chipped edge, the scar of a nail still wedged in place. It wasn't just metal, it was memory. A part of something long buried, not just in dirt, but in his chest. He wiped it clean on his sleeve, more out of instinct than intention, and stared at it like it might suddenly speak. Behind him, the barn door groaned as Lena stepped inside. She didn't say anything right away, just leaned against the post, arms crossed, letting her eyes adjust to the dimness. Her silence was unusual. She was a talker by nature, but lately, she seemed to understand that some silences needed to be honored. "That yours?" she asked finally, nodding toward the horseshoe. Emmett didn't answer. He looked at the object again, then slowly stood and walked over to a small, dust-covered chest tucked in the far corner. It hadn't been opened in years. The lock was rusted, but the latch gave way with a reluctant snap. Inside were old grooming brushes, a cracked halter, and faded feed log. He pushed those aside until he found what he didn't realize he'd been hoping for. A folded piece of paper. Yellowed. Fragile. He brought it to the light and carefully unfolded it. Lena moved closer, curious but quiet. It wasn't much. A child's handwriting, uneven and hopeful. Happy Father's Day scrawled across the top, the ink smudged in places where rain or tears had once fallen. Emmett's eyes didn't move from the page. "I found this horseshoe last week." The note began, "Near Dust Devil's stall. I cleaned it up for you. Thought you might want to keep it. Maybe for luck. I know you don't believe in stuff like that, but I do. You're the best dad a boy could have. I'm gonna ride just like you one day. Love, Jonah." The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Lena whispered, "He wrote that." Emmett nodded once, slow. She looked away, then back at him. "You never talk about him." "No," he said. His voice was rough, but not angry. Just worn. "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the open barn doors and stared out at the field. The grass was taller than it used to be. No horses had grazed it in years, but in his mind hooves still pounded there. Dust Devil galloping, mane wild, and Jonah bouncing in the saddle, laughing with pure, unfiltered joy. "He died in a fall," Emmett said at last. "Riding that same horse." Lena stepped beside him, quiet. "It wasn't the horse's fault," he added. "Wasn't Jonah's either. Just one of those freak things. A rabbit darted out. Spooked him. Dust Devil reared up. Jonah wasn't ready. He hit his head on a rock. I was there before the dust even settled." The air stood still. Even the wind didn't dare interrupt. I told myself I'd never ride again. Never touch another horse. I blamed the barn, the land, the sky, everything but him. But I think maybe I blamed myself most. Lena didn't offer comfort. She didn't say, "It wasn't your fault," or try to explain things away. She just stood there, her presence steady, grounding. The pig's snort broke the moment. Tater had waddled around the corner, looking pleased with himself, mud still clinging to his sides. Emmett almost smiled. "He led me to it," he said, nodding toward the patch of earth. "The horseshoe, the letter, everything." "Smart pig," Lena said. "Smarter than me, maybe." The next day, Emmett walked out to the barn with a toolbox. His movements were stiff, uncertain. He hadn't touched these hinges in a decade, but he began oiling them anyway, then sanding the stall doors where the wood had begun to split. Lena joined him after school, dragging in a broom and a bucket of warm, soapy water. It wasn't spoken aloud, but something had begun. An unspoken agreement. They worked in silence mostly, with only the occasional question. What was Dust Devil like? Lena asked as she scrubbed a feed trough. Fast. Proud. Too smart for his own good. Jonah swore he could read minds. Could he? Emmett considered. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I think he could. Over the next few days, they cleared out old hay, mended fences, polished brass nameplates. Lena hung Jonah's photo near the barn entrance without asking. Emmett didn't protest. He even stood there for a while, hand resting on the frame, lips tight, but not trembling. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the barn in amber light, Emmett stood in the now-clean stall and ran a hand along the rail. Used to be 10 horses here, he said. Now just ghosts. Lena looked up from where she was folding an old saddle blanket. Doesn't have to stay that way. He raised an eyebrow. There's a rescue auction in town next week, she said casually. They've got a few Mustangs coming in. Some are in bad shape. They could use someone who knows what they're doing. I don't know that I'm that man anymore. She shrugged. You knew how to bring a barn back to life. Maybe you can do the same for a horse. Emmett didn't answer. He turned away, but not before she saw something flicker in his eyes, something almost like hope. That night, he sat on the porch, the horseshoe resting beside him. Tater snored nearby, twitching in some muddy dream. Emmett sipped his coffee and stared at the barn, now glowing soft under the moonlight. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the land was watching him with judgment. It felt like it was waiting. And this time, maybe he was ready to move. The livestock auction was louder than Emmett remembered. Voices echoed off the rusted beams of the tin roof arena, mingling with the restless shuffling of hooves and the sharp clatter of gates. Dust hung thick in the air, stirred by boots and tails alike. Lena walked beside him, excitement radiating from her like heat off the summer road. Emmett moved more slowly, his hands stuffed in his pockets, shoulders hunched against memories that the place stirred like hornets in a jar. He hadn't been here in years. Not since the day he sold off the last of his stock. Back then, he'd walked out without looking back. Now, every creak of metal, every bray and snort, tugged at him like threads unraveling a shirt he thought he'd burned. Lena nudged him gently. You okay? He nodded, though his jaw was tight. Fine. They reached the back row of pens where the rescue horses were kept, unbroken, unwanted, misunderstood. There was one in particular Lena had mentioned on the drive over. Lot 38, she'd said. Gray Mustang. Bad history, apparently. Nobody's bid on him yet. Emmett stopped at the edge of the pen. The horse inside stood apart from the others, his head low, ribs faintly visible beneath a coat of grime. Scars, long and raised, crisscrossed his flanks like stories no one had asked to hear. His eyes were the color of storm clouds. Still, there was fire in them, flickering behind the layers of fear and defiance. That him? Emmett asked. Lena nodded. They say he charged a trainer. Broke his arm. Emmett grunted. Trainer probably deserved it. She smiled, then looked at him sideways. He reminds me of Dust Devil. He didn't answer, but she was right. There was something in the way the Mustang held himself. Proud, even in defeat. The bidding started. Lot 38 came up after a pair of older Mares. No one raised a hand. The auctioneer's voice wavered, trying to inject enthusiasm, but the crowd wasn't biting. Emmett's hand went up, slow but steady. A pause followed. Then the gavel dropped. Sold. To the gentleman in the back. Lena looked at him with something between surprise and reverence. You sure about this? No, he said, but I think I'm done being sure about nothing. The trailer ride home was quiet. The horse, unnamed still, stood tense, legs locked, eyes flicking toward every noise. Emmett didn't try to calm him. Not yet. Trust wasn't something you demanded. It had to be earned. Back at the ranch, they unloaded him into the stall that once belonged to Dust Devil. The Mustang resisted at first, jerking his head, nostrils flaring, but eventually stepped in with stiff-legged suspicion. Emmett stood outside the stall, arms crossed. He's got fight in him. Lena leaned on the gate. Think you can reach him? I don't know, he said quietly, but I want to try. They began slow. No saddle, no bridle, just time. Emmett visited the stall every morning and every evening. Sometimes he spoke, other times he just sat. The Mustang, still unnamed, watched him from a distance, ears twitching, ready to bolt at any wrong move. Lena helped when she could, always watching, learning. She brought apples, carrots, even an old radio that played soft blues. It didn't seem to soothe the horse, but it helped fill the silence. Weeks passed. The land greened after a long drought. The barn smelled of fresh hay again. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Emmett stepped into the stall without gloves, bare hands outstretched. The Mustang didn't rear, didn't bolt. Instead, he stepped forward, cautious, trembling, and let Emmett touch his forehead. "Good boy," Emmett whispered. "That's it." From that moment, everything shifted. Trust bloomed, slow but sure. Emmett brushed his coat, treated his wounds, let him graze in the paddock. He named him Second Wind. "He's different now," Lena said one morning as she handed Emmett a bucket of oats. "So are you." Emmett gave a small smile. "Maybe I was always waiting for something like him. Just didn't know it." They started groundwork next. Leading, turning, standing still. Second Wind learned fast, eager but cautious. He still spooked at sudden sounds, still flinched at raised hands, but he followed Emmett's voice like it was a trail through the dark. One afternoon, Lena brought out Jonah's old saddle. It had been in storage for years, but she'd cleaned and oiled it until the leather shone. "You think he's ready?" she asked. Emmett stared at it a long time before answering. "We both are." The saddling took time. Second Wind shifted, snorted, stomped. Emmett moved with patience, voice low, hands firm. Eventually, the saddle settled on the Mustang's back. He didn't buck, didn't panic, just stood there, tense but trusting. Lena clapped softly. He did it. Emmett didn't say anything, but the pride in his eyes said enough. That night, a storm rolled in from the north. Thunder cracked over the hills. Wind lashed the shutters. Emmett stepped out onto the porch, checking the barn lights. Everything looked fine, until he noticed the gate swinging open. He grabbed his coat and flashlight and ran. The rain had just started, fat drops splattering on the dirt. When he reached the paddock, the stall was empty. Second Wind was gone. Lena arrived minutes later, soaked and panicked. He must have spooked. The gate. "I know," Emmett said. He was already moving toward the field, scanning the horizon. They split up, calling the horse's name. Lightning split the sky, casting eerie silhouettes of trees and fence posts. The ground turned slick beneath their boots. Emmett moved faster than he had in years, lungs burning, heart pounding. Then he saw it, hoof prints leading down the ravine trail. His flashlight caught a flash of movement near the creek. Second Wind stood at the edge, breathing hard, sides heaving. His leg was tangled in a strand of wire fencing, panic in his eyes. Emmett approached slowly, voice soft. "Easy, boy. I'm here." The horse shuddered, nostrils flaring, but didn't bolt. Kneeling, Emmett worked quickly, hands steady despite the rain. The wire cut deep, but he freed it without injury. Then, unbelievably, Second Wind pressed his head against Emmett's chest, trembling. Emmett held him there, soaked to the bone. "You came back," he whispered. "So will I." And for the first time in years, he meant it. The storm passed by morning, leaving the ranch soaked and silver under the dawn. Fog curled low across the fields, and puddles shimmered like mirrors between the fence posts. Emmett stood at the edge of the paddock, his coat damp, hair matted to his forehead. Beside him, Second Wind grazed quietly, favoring his sore leg but otherwise calm. The wildness in his eyes had faded, replaced by something steadier, something that looked a lot like trust. Lena arrived with steam rising from 2 mugs. "You didn't sleep, did you?" He took the coffee and nodded toward the horse. Neither did he. She studied the pair of them, the man and the Mustang, both shaped by loss, both changed by something stubborn and wordless. "You should have called me," she said. "I had to be the one," Emmett replied. "I owed him that." Lena didn't argue. She just sipped her coffee and watched the sun melt through the mist, revealing the ranch in a soft, golden light. By noon, the mud had dried, and Emmett had made a decision. He retrieved Jonah's saddle from the barn again, this time with reverence. His fingers moved over the leather like he was reading Braille, memorizing every crease and scar. He brought it out slowly, letting Second Wind see it, smell it, remember it. The horse didn't flinch. With Lena helping, Emmett tightened the cinch and adjusted the stirrups. Then he stood beside the Mustang for a long minute, hand resting on the pommel. His breath came shallow. His heart thundered. "You sure?" Lena asked, quiet. "No," he said, "but I'm ready." He stepped into the stirrup and swung his leg over in one smooth motion. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The world held its breath. Then Second Wind shifted under him, nervous but willing. Emmett took up the reins and gently urged him forward. They moved as one, out of the paddock, into the field, through the tall grass and open air that hadn't seen a rider in nearly a decade. The wind rushed past Emmett's face, tearing through his thoughts, scattering old guilt like brittle leaves. Lena watched from the fence, her throat tight, a smile creeping across her face. It was more than a ride. It was something sacred, something resurrected. He didn't push the horse, just a slow canter, enough to feel the rhythm of hooves beneath him. He passed the old oak where Jonah used to climb, the creek bed where Dust Devil once drank, the ridge where father and son had raced the sunset. As he rode, memories surfaced, not like wounds, but like echoes. Jonah's laughter, the thud of hooves, the way the boy would always look back to make sure his father was still beside him. At the edge of the field, Emmett pulled the reins and stopped. The ranch stretched behind him, restored in small, beautiful ways. The barn no longer felt haunted. The pasture no longer felt hollow. He looked down at Second Wind and whispered, "We're home." That night, the ranch felt different, alive. Lena cooked a simple stew, and they ate it by lantern light in the barn office. Tater snored beneath the desk, snout twitching, content. "You gonna keep riding?" Lena asked, stirring her bowl. "Every day," Emmett said, "as long as he'll have me." She grinned. "He'll have you. You're both too stubborn to quit." He chuckled, a real laugh, low and warm. It surprised them both. Later, when Lena had gone home, Emmett returned to the barn alone. He carried the horseshoe and the letter, both cleaned and placed inside a small wooden frame. He mounted it just above Second Wind's stall, where Jonah's name had once been carved. The frame read, "Found, not lost." Second Wind nickered softly as Emmett rubbed his muzzle. Outside, the stars blinked awake one by one, spreading across the sky like embers from a long-dormant fire. Weeks passed, then a month, then two. The bond between man and horse grew stronger with each ride, each moment of quiet understanding. Lena came often, sometimes to help, sometimes just to be there. They rebuilt more than the barn. They rebuilt something deeper, family, though none of them said it out loud. One morning, as summer began to fade into gold, Lena burst into the barn holding a newspaper. "You made the front page," she said, slapping it onto the table. Emmett wiped his hands and squinted at the headline. "Widowed rancher and rescue Mustang defy the odds. Ride again after tragedy." There was a photo, too, Emmett in the saddle, Second Wind mid-stride, Lena waving in the background. He smiled and shook his head. "You did this," he said. "No," she replied. We did." He folded the paper and tucked it away. Recognition didn't matter. What mattered was that the story had been told. Later that afternoon, Emmett found himself back at the digging spot, now just a patch of earth like any other. No more mysteries buried, no more pain waiting beneath the surface. But he still knelt there, just once more. "Thank you, Jonah," he murmured, "for the sign, for the second chance." Behind him, Second Wind approached and stood quietly, as if understanding every word. Emmett rose and placed a hand on his mane. Tater joined them a moment later, tail wagging, snorting happily. The three of them, man, horse, and pig, stood in the sun, shadows stretching across the ranch that had once felt like a graveyard and now breathed like a new beginning. Emmett glanced toward the road and saw Lena approaching on her bike, hair flying, smile wide. He mounted the horse without hesitation. "Come on, boy," he said. "Let's meet her halfway." And together they rode, toward the road, toward tomorrow, toward something finally whole. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. I bring true, heartfelt stories every day.